The games we grew up with have a pretty big effect on who we develop into as gamers. To qualify for this list, these games need to meet a few criteria. First, it has to be games that I did not buy for myself. Just games that my parents bought for me. My parents rented for me or friends gave to me. Basically, the cutoff date for me would be about the PlayStation 2. That's the first console I ever bought with my own money, and it marked the point in my life where I was buying my own games. Second, I needed to play them more than once. I've played a lot more games than this growing up, but many of them I barely remember or played once at a friend's house. Lastly, no arcade or PC titles. I may do a separate list on those games one day, but I do not have a good way of recording the footage for them at the time. The list is going to be ordered based on console and generation that console came out. Alright, let's stroll down memory lane together. These are the games I played as a kid. I had the original Mario bundle with Duck Hunt and Track and Field, and yes, I did have a Power Pad, but when it came to Mario 3, that was my game of choice as a child. I was 6 years old when this game came out, and it's probably the earliest gaming memory that I have. I do not know what else I can say about it. I have a review of the game on the channel, which I'll post a link for, but this game basically started it all for me, and it's my favorite 2D Mario game of all time. This is not a very good game, but I had a lot of fun with it growing up, specifically the Noah's Ark minigame, as it is by far the most playable in the multi-game pack. The footage is from the Genesis version, but they are very similar in appearance overall. That said, the sound of the Genesis version is terrible, and if you're looking to own the game, I would recommend the NES version. It looked weird sitting on my collection shelf all those years, and I parted with it about 2 years ago when I sold a lot of my NES collection, but it remains burned in my memory, and I cannot help but think about it from time to time. Kicks is a puzzle game that revolves around the player boxing in a moving squiggly line named a Kicks. An abstract squiggly line that I guess they don't know what it is. Anyway, the player tries to close in the space around the Kicks, fill in enough space, and you win. At each subsequent level, the Kicks gets faster or multiplies. As the player, you can fill at two speeds, fast, and you score fewer points. If you want a high score, you need to risk the slower speed. This is a fun diversion on long car rides and is a game my wife likes quite a lot. I still play this game from time to time. I'm not sure why, really. Your player moves incredibly slowly, and sometimes I feel like the hit detection is, well, hit or miss for the ball. But the music relaxes me. I sort of enter a flow state playing this game. As a kid, I always wondered if you could hit the ball out of the tennis court, and I thought it was neat that Mario was the line ref. That said, sometimes I think he could be a little biased. The Game Gear was my portable console growing up. My brother had the Game Boy. But I only ever had two games for it. Sonic 2 is a cropped version of the Master System title, which I did not even know was a thing when I was a kid. It was fun up until the boss right here of the first world. The cropped nature of the screen was not accommodating enough for the boss, and the game takes away all your rings before each boss encounter, so one hit and you're dead. I would play this first part over and over as a kid, only to never get past it. From a modern perspective, the first level doesn't leave a great impression, even if you can get past it, but it's pretty interesting if you play the Master System version and the screen is actually zoomed out where you can see. Now, this game is not good, but I tried to play it many times. Between the claustrophobic play area, the slippery controls, and the confounding level design, it was a game I played a lot because it was one of the only two games I owned. After playing it again for this list, I doubt I'll ever touch it again. If you had a Super Nintendo, then you had Super Mario World, and honestly, if all you owned was this one game, it could keep you busy for a long time. I may need to play through this game on my Preacher Classics channel soon. It's been a while since I've beaten it, and playing it here for this video, I'm just awestruck once again at how amazing a game it really is. Even though I said Mario 3 is my personal favorite, it's hard to deny that this is a real contender for the best Mario game that has ever been made. I'm going to put these two games together. DKC2 is one of the most beloved games of my childhood, and it was the game I was playing when my brother passed away. These two games helped me work through a lot of lonely summers, and I still pull down DKC2 often to stroll down memory lane. Even after all these years, when I play this game, I can picture my brother sitting with me on the floor in front of the TV. Lee always liked to play as Dixie, and I always played as Diddy, so when Dixie is on screen, it really is a surreal experience. It's like he's playing it with me again. I know that there are better shooters than this one out there, but this one was the only one I played growing up besides Galaga. I loved this game as a kid, and it is another one that I played a lot even though I was never very good at it. Maybe one day I'll be good enough to beat it. You can play as one of 3 pilots who are mercenaries fighting a war for air superiority. Complete missions, buy new planes, try to stay alive. The game has amazing music that even while I'm writing this review, I'm humming in my head as I go along. Check it out if you like shooters. Like the Game Boy and the Game Gear, my brother and I both had our own 16-bit console. The Super Nintendo was mine, but the Genesis was his. That being said, like the handhelds, we often played together and swapped titles and consoles all the time. Our favorite games were usually games we could play together, or take turns playing. Sonic 2 embodies that cooperative aspect. People talk about the little brother mode Tails represents, but my brother loved playing as Tails, and yes, he was little, or younger at the very least, but my brother liked the game within the game. He would usually fight the bosses, since, Tails is sort of immortal, and he would try to keep Tails on the screen as much as possible, and it was fun for him to try to complete that challenge. We did not have Sonic 1 or 3, but we did have Sonic & Knuckles, and locking Sonic & Knuckles and the Sonic 2 cartridge together and playing as Knuckles was my brother's favorite way to play the game. Since Lee was technically the owner of the Genesis, of course he had a Power Rangers game. My brother was a huge Power Rangers fan, and he used to line up all his toys and make his own little home movies. This 1-on-1 fighting game was a little outside of our normal wheelhouse growing up. We did not know much about Street Fighter and the craze surrounding it, but I used to play it with my brother quite often. Being a big brother, I never wanted to admit how cool I thought Power Rangers were. Ninja Turtles were more of my thing when I was his age, but looking back, I enjoyed his enthusiasm for it so much. My favorite part of the game is getting into the Zoids, and even from a young age, I was fascinated with giant fighting robots. Another pretty standard title that came with my N64, it was definitely the game I played the most as a kid. DKC2 was the first game I ever beat, but Mario 64 was the first game I ever completed. I remember jumping into that cannon and meeting Yoshi up on top of the castle and getting 99 lives, and just thinking, that was awesome. I turned the game off that night, booted up the next day, and realized that all the lives were gone, and even if that had not been the case, I literally had nothing left to do on that save file. So after an initial disappointment, I promptly started a new save and played through it all over again. This game is just pure platforming bliss, and even to this day, I return to it often. I'm going to bundle these two games together because while they are different from each other, I often think about them collectively. I actually played Shadows of the Empire a lot more because I read the companion book, and it was so much more diverse in its modes of play. I love the Hoth and Asteroid mission early in the game. This is another one of those titles that I played to completion more than once. I got more into Rogue Squadron on the GameCube, but I do have some fond memories of the first few levels of this game. The game gets harder as it goes, so I do not think I ever beat that one, but I absolutely did beat Shadows of the Empire. I got a PlayStation a little later than my N64, and I remember borrowing a lot of games for it from my cousins. One day when one of them came over, they left this game behind. When I asked my cousin about it later, he said that it wasn't his game, and he had no idea what I was talking about. Curious about this mystery game that showed up in my house, I put it in the PlayStation and booted it up. I was not prepared for my very first RPG, and I'll probably never forget it. I have a full review of this game coming on the channel in the future, so I'm not going to spoil it here, but this game is just an experience. It's not the best RPG that I've ever played, not by a long way, but it is the most ambitious story-driven narrative-focused game that I've ever played. and it was the narrative that blew me away as a kid. So I was a pretty big Spider-Man fan growing up, but unfortunately, most games about the intrepid wall crawler were pretty bad, but not this one. This was simply the complete Spider-Man experience as far as I was concerned, and I played this game a lot. It's probably the game I played the most on the console as a kid, especially when I read in a gaming magazine that it had an alternative mode. Inputting this code into the cheat menu, you'd unlock a slightly altered version of the game with different dialogue and other changes to the graphics. Everybody was here: Doc Ock, Venom, Carnage, and many more. I played the sequel a lot as well, but I think I still to this day prefer the original. The only question I ever had was, why Jameson calls Peter instead of dialing 911 himself?
Bank robbery.
Parker, shut up and dial 911. Scorpion's here, and you have to...
Something to think about. And that's my list. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list. I played more games than this growing up, but I try to keep it down to 2 or 3 per console. I may do a follow-up list to this one day. I felt like 15 was probably enough for the first outing. Again, I may do a list about PC games I played at one point, or combine a sequel to this list with PC games. I also thought about doing a list of games I played as a teenager, starting from that PlayStation 2 and moving on to the PlayStation 3 generation. But that list would probably be much shorter, or it might be much longer. I played a lot of games in that time period of my life. But for now, I thought it was an interesting subject, something that, I wanted to talk about games that, I played a lot as a kid. A lot of people played, games that I didn't experience. Like, I didn't experience Ocarina of Time until I was a teenager, many years after, well, not many years, but a few years after it had come out. And so, but everybody has those stories about games their parents bought them. And, I remember very fondly being able to pick up my own consoles and games after I got my first jobs and, high school and college. But also there's something to be said about the games that made us, the games that our parents got for us or our friends loaned to us, or games we rented from the Blockbuster video. So that's what this list was about. I hope you enjoyed it. If you wanted to see another list like this, let me know. Leave me a like, comment, subscribe, all of those wonderful things. Check out the other content on my channel, other top 10 videos or top 12s or top 15s, and also the reviews I do, the retrospectives. And thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, have a great day.